Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fourth annual Laboratory of Feminist Memory, co-hosted by the Studio for Media Activism and Critical Thought and Glad Day Bookshop. Thank you all so much for being here. My name is Zainub, and I'm a research assistant here at the studio. For those of you who are new, just a little about us. The studio is a laboratory for some of Canada's most compelling media scholars, artists, and activists. Mobilizing knowledge across the city of Toronto. We organize an exciting yearly roster of symposia, yearly speaker series such as this one, workshops, and student faculty research creation outputs. In this way, we bring together Ryerson students, staff, and faculty, as well as faculty, artists, and activists from across the GTA and beyond. If you're interested in finding out more about what we do, you can visit our website at studioformediaactivism.com, which I will link below in the chat shortly. Basically, you can check out some of our past events and keep up with future ones. We also have a blog up there and a mailing list that you can sign up for to stay updated. And finally, we also have an active working group that meets once a month to share ideas and collaborations if you're also interested in joining that. So yeah, just a few housekeeping things before moving on. This event is being recorded, so if you do not wish to appear in the recording, please feel free to keep your cameras off. Unfortunately, we were unable to secure ASL for this event due to some last-minute unforeseen circumstances. And for this, we sincerely apologize. There is, however, live automated captioning available that you can enable by navigating to the live captioning button at the bottom right of your screen. Finally, there will also be a brief intermission in the middle of the event, as well as an audience Q&A at the end. In terms of submitting your questions, you can feel free to do so throughout the event in the chat at the bottom of your screen, where you can indicate whether you would like to speak your question out loud or have the moderator speak it for you. And there is also the hand up reaction as well. Yeah, we'll unmute you at that point. So yeah, I just wanted to also say a huge thank you once again to our audience for joining us tonight, as well as our lovely, talented guest speakers. Thank you as well to the SMAC team, Kala Evans for designing the official LFM posters and visual materials, Mira Govindasamy, our SMAC director, Imani Busby, our amazing research assistant, our working group members, our amazing event collaborators at Glad Day Bookshop, specifically Michael, who is here this evening, and the rest of the Glad Day team. And of course, thank you to Devani Ramanajum and founding SMAC director Marusya Bociurkiw for curating this year's beautiful iteration of the Laboratory of Feminist Memory. So yeah, with that being said, before I pass it over to Marusya, I just want to take a moment to lead us in a land acknowledgement. While we are all currently located in different places, I myself being located in Ottawa, Ontario, on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, through this virtual gathering attached to the physical entity of Ryerson University, located in downtown Toronto, I acknowledge the land that we are meeting on is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Mississaugas, and the Anishinaabe. In terms of my own history occupying this land, I am a settler with an immigrant background on both sides of my parents who came to Canada from Kenya and Chile, respectively. Yet beyond simply acknowledging our settler existence on this land and in an attempt to make our collective action more meaningful, the SMAC would like to also share a donation link to the Anishinaabe Health Center of Toronto that I will also link in the chat below shortly. As well, I wanted to also take a moment to bring attention to the tragic news of Dante Wright's passing in Minnesota a couple days ago. Dante was a 20-year-old father and son, and yet another Black man who had his life taken away from him by a police officer and an overall anti-Black police state. So we here stand in solidarity with Dante Wright's family, as well as the belief that enough is enough and that ending police violence means abolition and nothing less. So with that being said, we would just like to take a moment to share a couple additional funds with that purpose with you. The first is a fund set up directly by Dante Wright's family, and the second is a fund by the name of the Minnesota Freedom Fund that supports criminal bail and immigration bonds for those who can't afford it. So I'll also link those below shortly, and yeah, your support would be very much appreciated in that way. So yes, without further ado, I would like to introduce our wonderful event organizer and moderator for the evening, Marusya Bociurkiw. Marusya is a writer, filmmaker, professor of media theory at RTA School of Media at Ryerson, and she is also the founding director of SMACT. So Marusya, take it away.
Hi everyone, and welcome. It's great to see everyone here. Just a quick visual description. I'm white with red glasses and blue-gray hair. I'm wearing a striped jacket and I'm sitting against a red background. Yesterday and tonight at the Laboratory of Feminist Memory, as we think about the artifacts within the walls of our pandemic isolation, we consider allyship, friendship, connections, the communal, the affective, the haptic, the sensorial. We have talked about hospitality, gossip, care, seduction, and intimacy. And we wonder, because death and illness are all around during this pandemic, who will inherit these objects and histories? Where do we deposit our histories? Where do they live on? Thinking about these things, I hold space for my settler colonial story and my queer feminist diasporic history, and they are always intertwined, the colonial and the decolonial. As Arvin, Tuck, and Morrill claim, feminisms, when allied with other key causes, hold a unique ability to decolonize the ascendancy of whiteness in many global contexts. The future of feminism lies in its decolonization. My people come from a country whose name means border, whose archive is a text my queer femme body rewrites every day. How can we approach archives from the lens of the present, asked Amanda Min Wong yesterday. How can we address past wrongs as a resource for recreating a vision of the present? As a daughter of immigrants steeped in the milky tea of occupation and lost villages, talk of lesbian and feminist history made a new kind of sense for my intellectual and bodily hungers and brought me here to a feminist reimaginary, which is a history of the future, really. We have invited the artists and thinkers that you'll meet tonight to choose objects, texts, photographs, or whatever in their homes that resonate, that break isolation, that emit waves of memory, pleasure, remorse, loss, abundance, and so much casual courage. Bouquets of thanks to our participants tonight, to my colleagues at SMACT who put so much care into this event, and my co-curator, Devani Ramunajam, as well as, of course, Michael at Glad Day. I wish we could be in that space with you and everyone else. A warm welcome to the students from Social Justice Media class at Ryerson joining us tonight, and to those marking the first night of Ramadan. I know some of you have to leave at 8, and I wish you a blessed and generous month. Ramadan Mubarak. Finally, by way of segue, a brief tribute to Joan Nessel, founder of Lesbian History Archives, who we'd hoped could be with us tonight, but had to withdraw. So this is my object, my artifact tonight. Joan's 1987 book, Restricted Country, helped me to grow into being a femme lesbian writer in the 1980s and 90s. And it's a book that I have read and reread, and that is marked with its own archive of underlinings and food stains and crumpled pages. The book was written in the shadow of the McCarthy era and in the reality of the Reagan era, but it still holds up as an evocation of vulnerable, deviant bodies in this particular moment of anti-Black, anti-Asian, and anti-trans oppression amid a global pandemic. So I'm just going to read a very brief passage. As a woman, I was holding it upside down. As a woman, as a lesbian, as a Jew, I know that much of what I call history, others will not. But answering that challenge of exclusion is the work of a lifetime. If the personal is political, the more personal is historical. The more personal demands attention to be paid to how we fill our days and nights as we participate in any given economic system, how our flesh survives under different political systems, how we humanize gender tyranny, how we experience womanness and maleness in all the superstructures of class and race. Oh, and just to let you know about tonight's order of events, we'll have a performance by Monica Garrido, followed by presentations by Zainub Verjee, Fauzia, Rafique, and Margaret Christakos. There'll be a short intermission and a performance and a drag performance, followed by Laiwan and Shawna Dempsey and a Q&A. So with that, I'm going to introduce Monica Garrido, who's going to lead us into this event with some funny. Monica Garrido is someone I used to run into at Buddies in Bad Times theater in the before times, always a witty and vivid presence. And I've seen her perform on the Buddies stage, as well as in a lovely cameo in the Baroness Fun sketch show on CBC, not to mention her impressive performing and writing talent. She is a queer, Toronto-based, Mexican-born artist, filmmaker, writer, producer, director, comedian, and storyteller. Her short films have been part of the Inside Out LGBT Film Festival, and Monica is 1/3 of a Latinx drag king boy band called The Boy Band. And she is currently co-host and co-produces Radio Aluna Theater. She also wants you to know that she is a Taurus and that she wishes you the best.
Hello. Hi. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Monica Alejandra Garrido Huerta, but you can call me Monica, like that white lady from Friends. A little bit of visual description. I am wearing a dark blue button-up shirt with tiny white strikes or dots. I think they couldn't make a decision, so I will call it a splatter of tiny white dots. Also, my hair is in half ponytail, half down, and it's dark brown color, just like my eyes. And as Marusya just said, I am as queer as I am Mexican. I am from the north of Mexico, and I ended up in Toronto because I saw a TV show that changed my life. Degrassi, The Next Generation changed my life because I saw they had lesbians in there. So I booked a one-way ticket to Toronto, queer town, sometimes. And I need to be honest, when I read the prompt, I was a little bit nervous. I was like, I Googled a lot of the words because I wasn't sure, as English is not my first language. And then I also thought, well, maybe if I go second or third, I will know. But here we are, and here we go. But don't worry, Marusya's like, oh no, I did plan something. Okay, don't worry. Also, just want to remind you, if you're here for Here and Now book launch, this is not the place. And I just want to say that as an immigrant, I am not really attached to a lot of objects or artifacts. I mostly carry a lot of memories with me. But I was looking around my room and thinking, like, what object do I have with me since Mexico, and not something that I bought here, because that has a little bit more meaning to it. And I saw that I have this cross. I will describe it. It's a cross sign, and instead of the person who's usually in the middle, there is a moon and some circles with different colors. And it's a present my aunt gave me, and actually this is like the most Mexican aunt thing you can get. So if you have a Mexican tia, you're probably getting this for your next birthday. But I was thinking, I was like, what does it mean to me? It's like a great representation of what it usually is to something more of a decorative thing that you can have in your room. And this cross in different varieties you will find in most Mexican homes, because we love God. We love God. We love God and all of Jesus' family. We love Maria, Jose, and all the saints and all his group of friends, Pedro, Simon, Tomás, Yura, and Lady Gaga too. We love them all. And this object is meant to protect you and your home. But also for me, it was also the longest reminder that pleasure was a sin amongst many other things. And I was taught through church, and I also went to an all-girl Catholic school, that sex and religion were not friends. That pleasure was not a part of Jesus' diary, the Bible. But I have come to a realization that that doesn't need to be true to me. So my archival is my stories and how I choose to question what is written in that book or what is said by others who claim to work for Jesus, that's God. I know in this country, for me to use a Bible verse as a pickup line is not great, but it actually has never worked for me anywhere in the world. And telling someone in the club, like, hey, want to come to this after party called Church on Sunday, usually it doesn't work. And because of this cross and what it represents, I haven't come out to my parents yet. But I pray every night that an angel will whisper in their ears, psst, psst, your daughter's a lesbian. Peace be with you. So to challenge the notion about what religion and pleasure is to me, I decided to write a show about God, sex, and me. So I'm gonna read you one scene from my show called The Cunning Linguist, available on Spotify. I will be playing the role of God, myself, and others. Just an actor here. So here we are at my first house party ever in Toronto, and they're playing my favorite drinking, our favorite. Yes, our favorite drinking game. Never have I ever. Never have I ever made out with more than 3 people in the same night. Never have I ever had sex in a car. Okay. Never have I ever masturbated. Really? Never? No, I think it's kind of a sin, and I don't know. I never felt like touching myself. Then how do you know what you like? Have you ever had an orgasm? I think so. Have you ever watched porn and felt something down there? Because that's like masturbating, but without your fingers there, No, it's not. Oh my God. I just think, Monica, that you should give it a try and don't feel guilty about it. It's your own body and you must find what feels good to you. That was the weirdest game of never have I ever played. I realized I don't know a lot about my own body and sex. Like yes, I've seen porn, so I do know some things, but other things, I know they're wrong because the nuns in my school told me, and oh no. Are you saying, oh no, because you have already done stuff and now you're like, wait, was it good? Maybe. Well, if you did it with love, then you're good, right? Because sex is about love, like to express love. That is why you do it after you get married. And that is why I will marry all my exes. You think because you had sex with them, you will marry them now. Well, that's what the people that work for you told me. They say we needed to wait until marriage, which in Mexico is a little bit complicated for someone like me. I told you before, I have good workers and I have others who don't really get what's written down in my diary, the Bible. You can do whatever you want with your body. Pleasure is a gift I gave to you. And it's a gift that you don't only need to give to others, but you can give to yourself too, What? I'm just saying. Monica, mijita, this is your body. There's nothing wrong with exploring it. Pleasure is not a sin. But touching yourself is, myself, Monica. Masturbation is not a sin. It's a choice. You have the choice to do it or not do it. Well, what if I do it and I don't go to heaven? Are you listening to yourself? I own heaven, and I'm telling you it's okay. But if you don't want to do it, then don't do it. Well, in Mexico, I think I wouldn't do it, but I'm not in Mexico anymore, so okay, I should do it. If you're gonna do it, you must be able to say it too. Okay, I'm gonna touch myself. Masturbation, here I go. Wow. Just me and my hand, and wow. I feel awesome and guilty. Guilty of feeling pleasure. And now I feel weird because now I'm thinking about my parents. Like, can you sexually active? Actually, no way. I'm kidding. There's no way they can know. Also, what? They will feel it like once a year. Hey, I'm getting out there, meeting people. Maybe I don't really know how to push the right buttons, if you know what I mean. I think you don't even know what you mean, but let me help you. Just think about it like a taco. La vagina is just like a taco. You can smell it first. Yeah, like when someone's cooking something yummy in the kitchen. Or you can taste it, put your fingers in it, and try it. Tasting, mijita, can be so sexy. Remember, nothing says I love you like eating the taco of the person you love. And I know this cross will stay with me for the rest of my Canadian life. It will hang in the home that I share with my partner and our chosen family. It will remind me of what it means to redefine a religion that has been passed to me through my culture and my family. And this is my cross, and it doesn't look like any other. And my name is Monica Garrido. Thank you so much for having me. I will here just mute myself.
Oh my goodness. Monica, I was laughing, I was crying. I was trying to not laugh out loud because my mic was on. And I wish you could have heard everyone's appreciation. I love the idea of the Bible as Jesus's personal, as God's personal journal, and the vagina as a tacos. So thank you so much for that. For those of you who have just arrived, the theme of the Laboratory of Feminist Memory this year is Objects in Domestic Space, which sounds like a sci-fi movie. And so we've asked the participants to engage with an object that represent in their home that represents some aspect of their archive as a way to redefine and remediate the feminist and queer archive. So next is Zainub Verjee, who is someone I've known for a very long time and have gotten into lots of good trouble with. She's an artist, writer, critic, cultural administrator, and public intellectual. She's deeply engaged with the UK's Black British arts, third cinema, and the post-Bang Dung decolonization tactical video movement. Zainub has also been embedded in the early years of Vancouver's photoconceptualism movement, as well as the history of women's labor in BC. She co-founded the critically acclaimed Invisible Colors, a foundational film festival in Canada. In February 2020, she was awarded the Governor General's Award in Visual and Media Arts, and currently she's the Executive Director of Galeries Ontario, Galleries Ontario in Toronto. Welcome, Zainub.
Thank you so much, Marusya. Hi, I'm Zainub, South Asian. I have dark brown hair and graying at the shoulder and at shoulder length. I'm wearing glasses and a white shirt and sitting in my workspace in front of our bookshelf of books and objects. Thanks to Marusya and all of you, and it's so great to be part of this intimate dwellings. because that's where we've spent really our last year, haven't we, in the pandemic. It's been so many things this past year, but in some ways we have paused and reflected and re-engaged in many ways on things that we've put on hold in the past. I, for example, have experimented and tried out recipes, bread, baking, samosas, and cuisine that I call home. And it's something that I don't do often because I'm always at the desk. And it is in this reflective mode that food became this meditative and nurturing space for me. And the recipes became the archives. And today I'm going to open with a small reading from Gastronomy. It's an edition of the Critical Muslim, and it's published by the Muslim Institute. And I'm going to read from Twice Removed Migrant by Yasmin Alibai Brown. In January 2018, I went back to Kampala, the capital of Uganda, my birthplace. We Ugandan Asians were exiled from the country in 1972. I settled in London, vibrant, exciting, ever-changing. In time, that past faded like newsprint on old papers. Decades later, I was back in the land that made and nourished me. The visit was emotional and at first disorienting. The country is still lush, green, and gorgeous. Ugandans are still calm, stoic, full of laughter, and generous. In some parts, the city hadn't changed at all, but the center was overcome by too many cars, too much noise, vainglorious tall edifices, hotels for the very rich, casinos, and big businesses. At times, I felt like an interloper there, and at others, like a long-lost wanderer coming home. I found the tiny flat where I spent my early years. This is where my mother used to cook food for weddings, engagements, and birthdays, funerals too. In that sooty, airless kitchen, she produced vats of what East African Shia Muslims call akni, a subtly spiced rice and meat dish, piquant goat meat, coconut chicken, aubergine, and potato dry curry. It was all done on coal-fueled or Primus stoves. Her devoted assistant was Japani, a Black Ugandan. They sang Hindi film songs whilst they worked. His favorite was an anti-colonial ditty, Mera Juta Hai Japani, from the 1955 film Shri 420. He decided to change his name from John to Japani. And when I was little, I used to run down to the big food bazaar near our flat. One of the sellers would drag me back home and deliver me to my frantic mom. They called me Totopotea, lost child in Swahili. In the market this time, I was too that Totopotea again, touching mangoes, jackfruits, and pineapples, plucking my ears as they beheaded the chickens. Congolese music was playing. I started to dance. People joined in, a blissful moment of belonging. Now, to my son and daughter, I'm from a sad place in Africa, where they are big beasts, safari jeeps, spectacular views, but too much butchery and poverty for their refined Western sensibilities. They feel detached from my complicated upbringing, and when I insist on reminding them of it, they switch off or rebuke me sharply. I speak 4 non-European languages and try to pass them on with no success. They, true born Brits, never could be bothered to learn my sweet mother tongue. Kutchi, spoken in parts of India, and Sindh in Pakistan. In her last years, when Jenna found it harder to communicate in English, my children never got to know what she said and how she really felt. Perhaps they are apprehensive that to accept their multi-part, cluttered heritage is to thin down their entitlement to be truly and purely deeply British. Although there are times of immense dislocation and sadness, I now understand our nomadic history has made us into enthusiastic, incorrigible cosmopolitans, winners in a globalized world. Our food best exists, creative, sometimes impertinent and playful blends of Indian, Pakistani, Arab, African, Chinese, and English, now Italian, American foods too, forever in a flux. So with this reading as a prelude, I'm going to share some of the Ismaili cookbooks that are part of now my archive and my home. So this came out in the 80s. It was really cool. It's called the Ismailia Women's Organization, and it was organized by the Ismaili Council for the United Kingdom. And it has like, my notes in it and different things in it and all these different kind of recipes in it. And it was community organized towards the building of identity and really kind of looking at gendered relations. A couple of others that I want to share are A Spicy Touch, Volume 1 and 2. And I recall as a child going to their homes, the Nimji's home for many dinners. We were family friends, and I remember playing pick-up sticks with the kids, and of course the fantastic dinners. And the food that was cooked especially for the kids was less spicy, but always spicy enough. And Nurbanu Nimji came to Canada in the 70s and dedicated her life to preserving East African Ismaili food, and has done an amazing job of actually preserving this heritage. And then there's another one that I'm going to share really quickly from this one. It's Mama G's Kitchen, originally from South Africa, and this woman is a fantastic, also lived in Vancouver. She's unfortunately also passed away, but this amazing food memoir of her travels and the food cooked and bringing South African and East African food together. But I also want to point out one more, Marusya's Food Stories, and I'm going to read from her green binder, from this green binder book. Everybody's always asking me for my recipes, and I never seem to get around to writing them down. Until now, solstice New Year's 1993, and I'm in my usual seasonal avoidance thing with all those tiny carols they play and ideal images of families that don't seem to include me or anyone else I know. It's the food, the getting together, and the stories that I relate to. Friends gathered around a table, sharing a meal, making family out of the best of what we have and can imagine. People have been asking me about my stories too, and these I've been writing down. There will be a book soon enough, and it's full of food and anecdotes. So here's a little taste of recipes and food stories for the dear friends who inspired, nurtured, and fed me this past year, December 1993, Vancouver. And yes, indeed, it came out. Food Was Her Country. Here's the food memoir. It's there. If you haven't looked at it, you must get it. You must see it. You must look at this book. And also, when I worked at the Canada Council for the Arts, on a weekend, I put a little project called The Cold Delights. It was a compilation of friends' recipes. And during the pandemic, I've spent a lot of time with these friends and these recipes, some really yummy things. limited edition. Only 2 copies were made. But I want to end with an artwork that I did for International Women's Day this year for Embassy Cultural House. And it's, I'm just going to try and share the little image here with you. If you can just give me a second. Oh, it looks like I'm not able to share the image. I'm sorry. It seems, yeah, I'm not able to. Anyway, it's a little piece that I did with these books and Indian rice open with all the spices in it. I'll put a link in the chat so you can look for it yourselves. But basically, the artwork really pulls focus on the important and critical role that the Ismaili women of my community and other women generally play in settlement of migrant communities. And as I said, it was made for International Women's Day for Embassy Cultural House. And this artwork really pulls focus on the important and critical role that Ismaili women and other women play, but food plays a significant role in the daily practice of sustenance and the reproduction of tradition and community, both as a conduit to memory and loss. Women are central to these entanglements of cooking, recipes, labor, migration, settlement, nutrition, and feasting. Inherently, recipes are cultural texts, and a cookbook enables the memory shifts from archive to repertoire to embodied culture. A tool or recreating selfhood, recipe writing plays out nostalgia for the past, allowing the displaced or uprooted self to realize a sense of normalcy. These memories are prompted by the recuperation of culinary practices that are often unique to women. In the migratory and settlement dynamics of communities, the Jamaat, women have always played a critical role. And the work of these women through culinary practices have fostered our collective Jamaati identity, which needs to be acknowledged. We in the Ismaili community need to give them, these women, their due place in our cultural history, reflecting the contemporary times beyond the act of using these cookbooks. This work is dedicated to the women of my community who, through their recipes and cooking, embed cultural identity of the Jamaat. And that was the little piece that I wrote for this piece called Gastro Poetics in 2021. And I'm really sorry that I can't share the image, but I will put the link in the chat so you can see what I read and what that was referring to as the artwork that was in part of this International Women's Day. And so with that, I thank you all for listening to me, and I'm so happy to be part of this today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zainub. You know, I've already choked up twice this evening, so I hope I make it through without weeping uncontrollably. Thank you for reminding us that food is an archive and that recipes tell stories and that recipes are also often a metaphor for hybridity. Made me think of my mother's recipe books and her community cookbooks where, you know, you can learn simultaneously how to make cabbage rolls and also how to make potatoes coated in cornflakes. Because these community recipe books would bring together so many different historical and modern ideas. Anyways, thank you so much. So next is Fauzia Rafique, who is an award-winning writer of fiction and poetry. She's published 3 novels in English and Punjabi, including and was also a founding member of Diva, a quarterly journal for South Asian women, an important part of the Canadian feminist media archive. Her work centers around the empowerment of women, writers, and artists, and against the systemic forms of oppression. Through creative writing, blogging, and community development work, Fauzia supports the various struggles for equality. And her presentation is filmed, videoed, so we'll show the video now.
Hi, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me. When Marusya invited me to participate in an event focusing on feminist archives housed in domestic space, three things flashed in my mind in rapid succession. Diva, a quarterly journal of women of South Asian origin, that was a publication based in Toronto from 1978 to 1994 that I had the pleasure of co-founding and co-editing with dozens of strong and beautiful women and people. Women Who Name the Unnamed was a live show featuring 16 Pakistani and Canadian women heroes staged in Surrey, British Columbia in 2019. And the third was The Adventures of Sahiba, my novel that is a humorous fantasy about a woman writer from an underdeveloped country who escapes to a developed country. And this novel was begun in Toronto in 1991 and was published here in Surrey in 2016. Each of these three is a strong and an intertwined part of my personal domestic archive. But tonight I'll focus on the stage show alone, because after this event, it may lead us to talk about the current and future project of helping to create an archive of the works of Pakistan's women writers, artists, performers, and activists. And by telling you about it tonight, I was hoping to inspire you to support it. As a migrant of countries, continents, and cultures, I do expect to lose many valuables. People residing in my heart, trinkets, artifacts, breeze passing through the leaves of a specific tree, laughter of co-workers. As a migrant, I decide to not acknowledge the loss, not dwell upon the severance, to not want to see the flowers sprout from the seeds sowed in a garden of the past. Do not make that list of listing all that has been lost. The term feminist archives became alive for me in 2012 when I found something thought to have been terminally lost, Diva. What a gift it was. And my deep gratitude to women who found, curated, and published thousands of women's work, including mine. And they made it available online for free. And now to Women Who Name the Unnamed. 2018 was a strange year for me. Among other things, some of Pakistan's prominent women passed away. And later, I was asked by my peers here in Surrey, that is my second hometown, to organize a memorial program. Around the same time, in my first hometown, Lahore, a Punjabi writer published a short story collection where he attacked three of Punjab's women writers and artists in a vulgar and obscene manner, to the extent that people who read it were unable to remain silent. As a response to it, a group of women got together in an email conversation and decided a few things. Central to them was to develop an archive saving the creative work of women in Pakistan and the diaspora. And I'm flattered that I was one of the three women and the only one alive who were attacked by that misogynistic male mind. In Surrey, some funding came through for Women's Memorial Program, and we began to organize a stage show to celebrate women in Pakistan and Canada. The 3-hour stage show was filmed, and a 1.5-hour video has been extracted from the footage. Here I like to show you the trailer of that video, created by Surrey Muse's media producer Mariam Zora. Women who name the unnamed.
Sabine Mahmood, Fahmida Riaz, Asma Jahangir, Madia Gahar,
Sara Sohail,
Seema Kirmani, Kishwar Nahid, Hina Jalani, Huma Safdar, Dar Mai,
Sunira Tabani,
Surjeet Kalsi, Harsha Walia, Darshan Man,
Deanne Redder, Catherine Zabo,
I am most privileged to have known most of the women you just saw. Now, it may not make much sense, but I would like to end this presentation by reading a poem to you that I wrote in 2012. It is addressed to the unequal systemic structures to affirm a daily resistance. The poem is titled Alone. Alone. Hope lurks in my eyes as I open them, a useful substance. Today I work it to shine a shoe I wear, to walk out of your door, to go on your street, leading to an office you own, a mall you have, a company you fund, the people you pay. Among all these items of lasting value, notice that the hope, the spark, the shine alone is mine. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Fauzia, for that litany of Pakistani and local women heroes, and for your archive of diasporic feminist memory that is both loss, as you say, but also hope, which you describe as a useful substance. Fauzia's book, The Adventures of Sahiban, can be ordered through Glad Day Books, and the archive of the journal Diva can be found at the Rise Up Feminist Archive, which is online. Next up is Margaret Christakos. She is a white settler, bisexual poet, writer, image maker, and poetry mentor engaged since the late 1980s in experimental lyric feminist poetics of relationality, direct and indirect address, voice and touch, order and disorder, memory, and public listening. Margaret's one of the most prolific authors that I know. Her work includes 11 collections of poetry, a novel, and the intergenre memoir, Her Paraphernalia on Motherline, Sex, Blood, Loss, and Selfies. She is a former Fireweed Collective member and co-founder of Mix, the magazine of artist-run culture. She also created Influency, a Toronto poetry salon from 2006 to 2012, and curates public poetry events with an intersectional, diverse, and transgenerational lens. Her most recent books, Charger, and her latest book, Dear Birch, which is beautiful, can be ordered through Glad Day as well. Welcome, Margaret.
Thank you, Marusya. And thank you to everyone for being here. I'm so honored to be together with you. And I've really been enjoying the wonderful range of work already. Thank you so much. Let me just give you a visual descriptor. I'm a white 50-ish woman wearing purple glasses, dark jacket. There's an assortment of visual images on the wall behind me. One of them looks remarkably like a tasty taco, to be intertextual. And tonight I'm going to read a text I've prepared, and in and around that text, I will introduce you to a few objects as well. Passing on information does not make us remember it. Something has to happen inside the organism for memory to occur. For something to occur in memory, the skin is a membrane. For something to touch my insides, I have to involve it in movement. Information moves when it seeps through time and becomes material. Memory occurs in the dwell or the repercussion. When the wind gathers, it's clearly full of information. Pull some cotton over your body. Imagine it's made of language, which used to go on outside the head, but now swirls from gaze to gaze with a new efficiency. I'm passing you on this message, and don't think it's casual. This is something else. I think you should read it. As I wrote in a Facebook post, 18 December 2014, the colossal amount of information times the inverse loss of embodiment fucks us up as a species. In this social media era of cascading disclosure online, engulfed by converging waves of both rampant surveillance and instant obsolescence, the real material archive seems like a dream. All those paper letters stuffed in bedside drawers and photographs with slick finish, all the hand-drawn sketches, our hefty bookshelves, all the objects stashed in domestic space that mirror the self's pull over time to continuous embodied self-recognition. Insofar as the domestic object in which I dwell intimately is, let's say, the writing notebook, the writing notebook. I ask myself, what might this notebook be now, since the overwhelming rise of social media, which blurs the lines between public and private, between direct and indirect address? And where does one place the reflective mirror or labile portal or tasty taco to enter this space? And whose space will it be to remember? Here's a mirroring object that I keep in my personal space. Rather literal, this is the hand mirror that belonged to my Greek aunt. And it's monogrammed Anastasia 5, Anastasia the 5th. I, of course, was the next. My middle name is Anne. Let's see. This object is the original self-reflexive handheld device, no? Perfect for a handsome selfie, but a selfie that is elusive, mobile, and unfixed. Time in the handheld mirror never stops. Unlike our cell phone selfie obsession, where every frame has a timestamp and every pose is evidence, the hand mirror is a private stenographer of desire. Where then would that archive appear? If she is a poet, possibly in poetry and its preparations, in notebooks, diary notes, where it can be replayed, then in code, memory, speculation. I imagine my aunt, born in 1923, who did not marry or have children and lived with her mother all her life, looking at herself in this mirror, privately in her bedroom, adding these spectral moments of self-portraiture to the relatively small portfolio of photographs of herself taken by others. What might she have had? 40 pictures of herself? 30? By the 1960s, she was constantly taking Super 8 movies and Polaroid pictures of me and my siblings. By contrast, I imagine my grandmothers having 10 or 20 photos of themselves, barely any alone. Both arrived in Northern Ontario within a year of each other, in 1915 or so, at about the age of 15, Dorothy from Manchester and Dimitra from a small mountain-backed port village in the Peloponnese. In 2016, I published Her Paraphernalia, a creative memoir that includes prose, poetry, and photography. After my mom had a stroke that disabled her language capacities, we began to have a physical closeness that repaired a lot of the basic estrangement I had felt for most of my life. At 20, when I came out to her as queer, she pulled away, and we both noticed. I looked for my intergenerational matrilineage back in time, past the borders of settler amnesia, in an ongoing research memoir that explored this basic lack, this impossibility of touch I felt between my body and the bodies of the women I had come from. The problem was an a priori brokenness or rupture of intimacy that I described as sensing a chaotic split, a stark breastlessness with my own mother and all of the other women in my lines. I couldn't touch them. I had not felt touched. As remediation of this wound and insistence to repair it, I used selfie photography as one of the methods. Here's one of the effervescent self-portraits I made with Anastasia's handheld mirror, posted 3 August 2015. It's titled Hand Dance with Lap and Fan. And here's a photo of my grandmother sitting at the lake with Anne on her lap in negative. Parts of my memoir I wrote directly onto Facebook. This piece addresses my grandmother's. How is it you knew who you were or your worth, your worthiness in the world, before or without pervasive forms of portraiture supporting your self-image? When you were born, was your mother's gaze upon you steady, emphatic, prodigal? You were each the first girl child or the first girl to survive, the eldest daughter to a young mother. Did she see herself reflected in your iris, transferring her own mother's imprint onto you? It's all a little idealized, a performance I want to isolate and invest with importance. If you were seen, you were mirrored. And isn't that the photograph's surrogate slate of gaze? Mama mnemonics. What you are trying to recreate is a slide of her eyes across your own. I get a frisson of recognition when I reread a Facebook post I made 10 March 2017. I've been thinking a lot about how reading the voices of others on social media without seeing their faces as a daily norm leaves me with a hunger for a mirroring gaze. Sometimes I feel I'm roving, looking for something, and I think that something is the faces that I know lurk somewhere above all the typed voices. In brief, I'm thirsty for your eyes. Now in pandemic time, I'm thirsty for your entire bodies. Turns out I have a second object to share. When Barbara Goddard died suddenly in May of 2010, I brought to my Influency Poetry Salon this small framed snapshot from 1999. I'm holding my daughter against my chest. Our bodies seem continuous. I'm looking at her face. She's looking at my mouth, touching my lips with her fingers. I brought it as a spontaneous vigil for Barbara's work as a radical feminist scholar, translator, and critic, a momentous link in the 1980s between Anglo-Canadian feminist writing and Quebecois radical lesbian writing in the feminine. The photo held space for how Goddard had, in particular, translated Nicole Broussard's lesbian feminist poetics, connecting a radical experimental writing circuit across the country. I dropped a Facebook post on 12 September 2012. Maybe Broussard's The See Our Mothers was a post-digital transmission from the future spiraling back. How do we know if to be present is? Kind of like laundry under the dining table or dishes in the sink. Once you start noticing real objects, they're everywhere. So here's my third object. It's a drawing that my daughter did at the age of 4 or 5, which I've since kept close as a reminder of this sameness as absence, this disjunct bereavability between women instilled by white empire, patriarchy, and capitalism. The image says something to me about the daughter's need to keep her distance from the obligatory heteronormative reproductive agenda of her sex. It's as if a wind blows each of the figures in a diametrically opposed direction. Some sort of resistance must be maintained to retain difference, autonomy. I notice myself as a third point in the composition, looking on both mother and daughter, oddly identifying with both of them, that complicated intermeshing. As I write in her paraphernalia, one can say there are borders between bodies, and one can be right. One can vouch for voicing borders. Also, though, with my mother and my daughter, my cells strangely feel migratory and insidious and recurrent. It is a narrative of our continuities past the borders of our bodies. It is a streaming of a gaze and a touch. It is a desire and also a weird, occult rippling. A hand mirror, a snapshot, a drawing. These are some of my archival domestic materials, certainly, but I would argue so too is the Facebook history of writing and photography I've composed over 14 years since 2007. Many of my posts are thinking about Facebook itself as a liminal space. For example, the beauty and challenge of Facebook is that it is an absolutely smeared space of the veiled, regaled, and the displayed, played. Sometimes my posts are rallying cries. 18 November 2018. Take this, you PC bastards. We're here, we're queer, we're radiant, we're exponential. We're in your face, we're a boom of bloom, a burst of urgency, a stern, restless love of each other and the rights of citizenship for all. 22 January 2017. Stand up and be cunted. 5 November 2017. How about water is a human responsibility? or even celebrity pop culture woot woots. 13 February 2017. Did I just realize that Beyonce invested the Grammys with a literal daughter, mother, grandmother, super matrilineal ascension ceremony? And some posts are relaying thoughts about influence in feminist memory, like this one. 6 April 2011. Last night, found a massive box of my writing journals and sketchbooks from 1983 to 86 when I was 21 to 25. Notes on going to see my first readings by Gail Scott, Four Horsemen, Lillian Allen, Erin Moray, Gwendolyn McEwen, Yolande Villamere, and more. 27 September 2017. I am a poet in order to participate in my capacity to unfurl contradiction and not to be a vampire of empire, but to be a giver of blood to others as well. And this one, 7 October 2014. One of my biggest feminist politicizing influences was seeing the film This Is Not a Love Story at the Canadian Film Festival in 1982. I remember scenes where a married straight couple were crying and talking about how hard sex, eros, and communication were, given the many problematic layers of patriarchy. I remember thinking, what are they so upset about? I didn't get it at all, but it stuck. And soon, over the next year or two, I started perceiving with a feminist consciousness in both personal and social contexts. I was 20. I just started to understand how complicated it all was, and how the questioning and naming of the complicatedness was the act that changed everything. Often I would puncture my posts that include writing about writing, domestic and maternal labor, teaching, curating, and critical thinking with self-conscious notes of anti-social media defiance, pulling my chest away from the medium. 14 October 2008. Why am I telling you this? You are not even here. 29 November 2014, thinking more about neoliberalism and how social media is one of its arms. More and more we think in pithy, immediate, hyper-efficient, memory-erasive ways that collapse the idea of depth and extended time, wasted time, exhaustive time, the kind of time that is actually involved in writing anything of value and in caring for others. And 3rd of July 2015, guys, this is post-selfie work. It's like beyond the selfie, on the other side of the screen, and I am also the screen, so. I admit I've also done massive amounts of dwelling in practices of writing and digital photo collage work using Facebook and other social media as circuitry. It's been a magnetic generative mirror. So here's one last archival object. It's a text about writing I wrote on Facebook that, like hundreds of other compositions, exist nowhere else until now. This evening, this text is meshing for me with the drawing I showed you of generations at a standoff. One is awaiting the other, one is swerving. There's no cessation of that intimate field of energy holding them in a helix. The present is a counter archive of speculation about a moment when each becomes the radical hand mirror of the other. 30 December 2015. Writing mind is weaselly. If she can't have her way, nothing else will get you either. But she's not quite ready to cavort, so you wait, deke, twist, and fidget. You do nothing, but writing mind's at it. Anyhow, she's a ferret. She slips. When writing mind pulls this kind of shit, you just update your status. See, you're doing something. So there. You mink. The ground, only half frozen, is full of holes. See her bob around like blood? She's half cat. She has whiskers and a tail, and some part of her always trails into view, even if she thinks she's perfect air. She hogs the ground and froths forth, even as she backs into a corner and says, silence. You look up the sounds she might make if your luck starts to leak. She sounds like windows being cleaned with vinegar. She sounds like something about to begin. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Margaret. That was lovely. I really love the movement in your work between the digital and the haptic, and also the way that you legitimize our social media labor. I was thinking that I would really love to see what you would do with TikTok. And I really love the embodiment of your writing and the taco sensibility.
The taco's at the heart of it all. Yes.
Thirsty for your entire bodies, and of course, stand up and be cunted. That should be on a t-shirt. So thank you. We're going to take a little drag break with drag performer Manny Dingo, and after that, Laiwan and Shawna Dempsey will be our next presenters. So Manny, take it away.
Hello, everybody. My name is Manny Dingo. I'm gonna move a little things here. I am a drag king, so if it is your first time seeing a drag king, welcome. Today, I'm gonna do some really fun songs. So I just wanna let y'all know that I am going to kind of change the vibe a little bit, get y'all a little bit pumped up. Surrounded around me in my room, I do have my Transformers, which I am going to be doing a song about gay superheroes. The first song I'm going to be doing is essentially last year when kind of SHIT hit the fan. Kid Flash, or the person that played Kid Flash, created this song, which was basically for you know, the queer community, but specifically for trans women and queer femmes. In the back, I also have my Live Long and Prosper, which is a Star Trek reference. In 2017, I started watching Star Trek, and it is honestly the most important thing that I've thought in my life that can kind of get me out of the world. So without further ado, I will perform a little something for y'all. Just give me a moment while I set this up. Ooh. And welcome to the stage, myself.
Oh, I feel it now. For anyone who thought they couldn't be themselves and be the hero too, your time is now. Yes! And it's not gonna be easy. Sometimes we might feel lost on the way, but if we persevere, oh, this life sure will be beautiful. So will you stand with me? 'Cause honey, I'ma need all the help I can get. You see, I looked up into the stars and they told me it's about time we change the world. Are you ready? Now I'ma get a little nasty, get a little sassy, teaching niggas why pretty boys rule. And they be bitching about the homos 'cause they got the FOMO, but they wanna taste the pussy so good. So we can hit it from the front, we can get it from the back. Probably suck up on my dick good, better than they chick do. Making all the straight boys, I know I'm making it hard for you. And we never tried to hurt no one, we just love. That ain't wrong, baby. But you know now our blood's been spilled by your hands and I've had enough. Your motherfuckers turning me into the gay street fighter. I'm trying to love you, but you're making this shit so hard. Stay trying to help you clean your mess 'cause you done fucked it up. And even though you might not thank me for your happy life, just know it's great that makes the world so goddamn bright. Now let me tell you about a time the universe was mine, and yes, it told me to deliver this message. See, all the ones that you adore, the ones we should ignore, 'cause they be putting chains on your destiny. And we got to see, got to believe that nothing really matters. Gotta let go of all the pain, of all your shame. One world, one love, one rain. And we never tried to hurt no one, we just love. That ain't wrong, baby. Don't you know now our blood's been spilled by your hands, and I've had enough. These motherfuckers turning me into the gay street fighter. I'm trying to love you, but you're making this shit so hard. Stay trying to help you clean your mess, cause you done fucked it up. And even though you might not thank me for your happy life, just know it's gay that makes the world so goddamn right. Now let me say it again. I'll preach it louder for the back. The truth is, everybody's just a little bit gay. Now let me say it again, baby. I'll preach it louder for the back. The truth is, everybody's just a little bit gay. Your mother, she gay. Your brother, so gay. All your soldiers, baby. Yeah, they all just a little bit gay. Your teacher, so gay. And your doctor, so fucking gay. Look in the mirror, baby. You gay too, bitch. See, we all just a little bit gay. And even God, she gay. Even God's just a little bit gay. So gay. And even God, gay. Even God's just a little so gay. Fucking gay. He did not just say that. Yeah, you gay too, bitch.
Man's art on beat, bitch.
My body, my hair, I let it grow everywhere. My body, my hair, I let it grow everywhere. Everybody looking at my armpits, like you ain't never seen nothing like this. Not no traditional bitch. Nope. Not no conventional shit. I'm in my own lane. I do my own thing. Keep your razors, keep your wax, keep your beauty standards, they all whack. My body, my hair, I let it grow everywhere. My body, my hair, I let it grow everywhere. I got hair in my ass, crack. You can see that shit from the back. I mean, it's all on my nipples. You wanna see it, but you gotta pay triple. Bush gang, bush gang, bush gang, bush gang, gang. Let it hang, let it hang, let it hang, let it hang, hang. Keep your razors, keep your wax, keep your beauty standards, they all whack. My body, my hair, I let it grow everywhere. My body, my hair, I let it grow everywhere.
Man's art on beat, bitch.
Is that it? Thank you, Manny Dingo. I'm your newest fan. Yes, indeed, everybody is just a little bit gay. Thank you. Okay, next up is Laiwan, who joins us from Vancouver. She is a cultural activist, interdisciplinary artist, writer, and educator with a wide-ranging practice based in poetics and philosophy. Born in Zimbabwe of Chinese parents, her family immigrated to Canada in 1977 to leave the war in apartheid Rhodesia. She teaches in the MFA in Interdisciplinary Arts program at Goddard College. I would also say that Laiwan's bio is very modest, and so I've added mention of her poetry collection, Tender, which you can order through Glad Day, and the recently announced fact that she is the recipient of the Emily Alumna Award from Emily Carr University of Art and Design. Welcome, Laiwan.
Thank you, Marusya. It's a really difficult act to follow, Manny. But I'm very, very privileged and grateful to be here. And thank you. I'd like to, first I will describe myself. I'm a Chinese woman, non-binary appearing with a little orange toque, glasses. I've got a black t-shirt on and I have a white background behind me. Beginning, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. I arrived here and found refuge with my family after leaving the war in Rhodesia in 1977. To begin, I will share a screen. And I'm going to be quite cryptic in my presentation. I'm not going to be explaining things. There's two poems that I'm going to be reading, and then a little excerpt from a text that I'll tell you about. And of course, I'm losing my voice now, which is typical. I will share the screen. Let me see. So what is here is a little snapshot from my childhood. And these are two people who are very important to me. I want to speak a little bit to intergenerational lineage and heritage. And on the left is my grandmother. On the right is my sister Faye, and that's me. And behind us is my father's station wagon. We're standing in front of our store on Resende Street in what was then Salisbury, Rhodesia. So the first poem I'm going to read is from a project from 1992 called The Imperialism of Syntax. The turmoil from war and opium and poverty made you leave your country, exposed now to lands that will restrict your entry. You had traveled long and far to be subject to another's language, another's syntax. Right away, those rules of grammar were the forgetting of yourself. Those letters never pronounced before became the subject of your ridicule. The bitterness on your tongue became hidden in need for survival, a proof of assimilation, the invisibility of yourself. Now you are here. Do you remember your syntax, your language, that which would be the remembering of yourself? Here, when you are told to go back to where you came from, tell it back to he who has said it. This land where no one could have laid claim, no one could have possession, still it happened. Strength comes from a hard-worked life. Oops, that is the text for The Imperialism of Syntax. The next poem I'll read is called Untitled 2, and this is in my poetry book called Tender, which came out in 2020. The photographs are by Sharon Ewan, an artist in Vancouver as well. And the title of it is 340 East Cordova, image 1 and 2 from 1983. Untitled 2. We know this well, Apa, images and memories, ours and also not. When you arrived, I was 3. Days sewing in the Hong Kong factory replaced with selling tea and bread to locals. On this voyage, you brought almond and old wife cakes, tastes now my reminders of you and the old country. Noisy streets with gates trying to keep us together, lived at once with pride and pain, in wealth of imagination and poverty of materials, shared with adaptability, improvisation, and ancestral spirit. I remember the courtyard of our store cemented with memories of immigrant struggle. Small chicks grew here. Small chicks grew up here as laundry hung out to dry. To one side was a storage room where the workers lived, sleeping on cardboard for beds, cramped in apartheid without home. On the other side was a tree that Ba had brought from Mozambique years before. something I imagined to be like a Chinese magnolia with small yellow-white flowers. This sweetly scented magnolia, grappling also with colonial Africa, was caught between pavement, a brick wall, and the courtyard roof of corrugated iron that threatened to cut off its leaves. It stood alone in this little rectangle of dirt, imagined by Ba as a garden from China. Beside this tree was another small courtyard where clothes were washed and we bathed, where Mum grew her bean sprouts and the stray cats fought territorially for comfort. I remember before the bathroom was built how we all washed, all of us kids, one at a time in a big metal basin. We were dusty, and the pavement made us dustier. Here I notice a solitude, a quietness, a history of my father and grandmother, a depth of silence, something like survival. It's the second part of this poem. We know this well, making do with what is left or what is allotted, improvise and adapt, play where you can. This defiance, this insistence to be practical and bear quietly, pursued as an epistemology of our ancestors. Who has shown us to reconstruct this village in the back street, on this road less traveled, a corner we claim in a humble happiness of basic necessity, proud at the ability to make do with little. Arms crossed, holding the chest together, bands across your cardigan also to keep it together, to keep heart from spilling, hands hidden to keep from telling too much, from having to deny having done anything. These three muses, past, present, future, we know them well. The looking back just in case, the anxiety of where we may fail or for what's about to come. And then he, defiant and straightforward, eyes ablaze. We will find you being threatened to change and move, relinquished as tastefulness erases your epistemology. Yet every back street fertile the world over and every paved courtyard savored for its reverie of possibilities will find a magnolia growing today, even in a rectangle of dirt. So I'll go back to this photograph. And it's, I think, circa 1967. It might be 1968. My sister Faye left what was then Rhodesia. She was a teacher. I spent a lot of time with both my grandmother and with Faye. And so in this reading today, I'm honoring my elders and these two special people. Faye went into exile from Rhodesia to Britain in 1968, and she went to do her graduate studies in literature, and then became a lecturer, and then became involved in activism. So before I go there, I'm just going to read an excerpt. So this excerpt is from Faye's memoir called Reliving the Second Chimurenga, Memories from Zimbabwe's Liberation Struggle by Faye Chung. So the car is, I'm going to bring the car as an archival object. It won't be the car that's in this photograph. It's a car that my sister had after studying and teaching in Britain. She went to teach in Zambia. So just north of Zimbabwe. What is Zimbabwe now? So this is an excerpt from her memoir. An incident occurred which unfortunately involved my car. Some of the guerrillas loyal to Satoli appeared at my house together with the agent and informed me that Satoli had requested the use of my car for that day. As a member of ZANU, it was extremely difficult for me to refuse to allow our own president to use my car, and after grilling the group as closely as possible, I agreed to allow them to have the car for several hours. Of course, the car did not reappear that day and was missing for several days. So her car has been lent out and it hasn't returned, and so she's looking for it. And so I'm not going to fill in the details. I'm just going to go to after the car has been found. Having now identified my car as having contained a radio transmitter, some bullets, and some explosives, I realized I was in serious difficulty. Either they had committed some crime utilizing my car, or there would be an attempt to incriminate me in some crime. It was even conceivable that there would be an attempt to kill me. The Rhodesian regime was then offering tens of thousands of dollars for the capture or killing of a freedom fighter, and my death would make someone very much richer. However, it was essential to keep a calm face and to behave as if nothing was amiss. We managed to do this throughout the period. Meanwhile, I had to plan my escape. Unfortunately, the university term was just about to begin, and my sudden disappearance would involve letting down my department. But in the circumstances, it was essential to act quickly. My colleague, David Kerr, assisted me by driving me to the University of Zambia bus to the airport. We used a bus because, as members of the drama section of my department, we often used the university buses to drive students to and from rehearsals. Buses were also used for the frequent traveling theaters that was organized to tour the provinces. Thus, getting into a university bus would give the impression that we were just doing part of our usual work. I arrived at the airport an hour before the plane to Maputo in Mozambique was to take off and bought a ticket on the spot. Within an hour, I had left Lusaka, which had been my home for over 4 years. Thanks to the Rhodesian Secret Service, I was now thrown into the liberation struggle as a full-time freedom fighter. It was August 1975. So we arrived in Canada in 1977. I remember being shown a newspaper clipping that the Rhodesians were looking for a Chinese woman. And then I knew that my sister was perhaps in trouble or in danger. So in 2008, this is a photograph from 2008, and she's being interviewed by the media. She had run as an independent candidate for the Senate. And then she had been working since Zimbabwe's liberation. She had become the Deputy Secretary for Administration in the Ministry of Education from 1980 to 1988, and Minister of Education in President Mugabe's cabinet from 1988 to 1993, and Minister of National Affairs, Employment Generation and Cooperatives from 1993 to 1995. So her Senate run was in 2008. If you'd like to know more about Faye's work, she is on Wikipedia, or you can find her on Wikipedia. And I'll stop the share. And in this presentation, this poetics, I wanted to speak to what often cannot be spoken about when one's life is in danger or when one's loved ones are in exile. But also the great influence this person has had on my life, both my granny and my sister Faye. Thank you.
Thank you, Laiwan. That was beautiful and complex and so resonant. I really appreciate how you locate the silences in your history, in your archive, but also how rich you make those silences. The depth of silence, something like survival. So thank you. Last but not least is Shawna Dempsey. I met Shawna in the 1980s when she used to perform at benefits and feminist events in Toronto. We lost her to the cheaper rents of Winnipeg. Shawna is a performance artist who since 1989 has collaborated with Lori Milan on performances, films, videos, publications, and public art projects addressing lesbian and feminist themes. Their most well-known works are the music video, We're Talking Vulva, and a lot of vulvas and taco tonight, and the performance video, What Does a Lesbian Look Like? Shawna is also co-executive director of Mentoring Artists for Women's Art, which encourages and supports the intellectual and creative development of women in the visual arts. Her books, Bedtime Stories for the Edge of the World and Lesbian National Parks and Services Field Guide to North America, can also be ordered through Glad Day. Welcome, Shawna.
Thanks, Marusya. Quick visual description. I am a white, middle-aged settler woman wearing glasses and a purple shirt. My hair is brown, my eyes are brown. I'm flanked by plants, and behind me are two pieces of art. One is a red hairdryer on a white background with the word change. And the other is actually a sign for a business. It says Ms. Purdy's in red and black on a white background. And there's an illustration of what appears to be a suffragette painted by a hippie. It's a very groovy suffragette. I want you to want me. I want you to want me, even though I don't really want you. I don't want you at all, but I want everyone else to. I want everyone else to want you, but I don't want you to want anyone else but me. All I want is your want. I want you to need me, to cry for me, to suffer for me. I want to be your chocolate cake, your hot water bottle, your savior. As long as it doesn't take too much of my time. As long as I can say thanks, but no thanks. And you'll still love me and want me forever. And I'll be beautiful forever. And I'll live forever and ever in your broken heart. While I remain perfectly intact, wanted. Hi, everybody. Greetings from Winnipeg, Treaty 1, traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe, Dene, and Dakota peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. The text I began with is an excerpt from one of my very first performance pieces, Object, Subject, Desire, that was created, like all of my work, in collaboration with Lori Milan. I used to perform Object, Subject of Desire in a ball gown that was made of white paper, very stiff and crinkly, a very pretty blank page. At its essence, performance is made out of bodies, mine and yours, and time and space. I've always known this, but it became particularly evident and poignant in July 2019, when the studio that Lori and I shared burned to the ground. We lost everything that we had made over the previous 30 years. All the costumes, all the props, all the archives, every scrap. Paper burns quickly and hot, as does a film negative, and fabric, wood, and so on, until even the building's I-beams twisted in the heat. The fire smoldered for a week. Now, I suppose as a performance artist, I'm lucky that I have carried and continue to carry my archive in my body. Even though that costume is destroyed, the performance continues to reside in my mouth and in my mind. Memory is an archive. I remember, and if I'm lucky, my audience remembers too. The text that I just recited, the excerpt from Object Subjective Desire, speaks with irony about wanting to remain perfectly intact. Now, perhaps the only thing I know for sure, the older I get, is that none of us remain perfectly intact. Not physically, certainly, and not our souls, nor should we. As Marusya mentioned, in the 1980s, Laurie and I moved to Winnipeg from Toronto. And now at that time, there were 4 gay bars in operation here in Winnipeg, 3 of which were community owned. Winnipeg was too small to have a thriving bar scene. Bars didn't make sense economically, so the community made them happen. Happenings was a dance bar. Giovanni's Room was kind of more of a coffee house vibe, and Ms. Purdy's was a lesbian bar. In fact, the longest continually operating lesbian bar in North America, 1984 to 2002, rest in peace. To go to member-owned bars, you had to buy a membership. It made them a little bit safer, and as a member, you could go to the AGM, like with any other not-for-profit, and vote on things like the volume of the music. As a birthday gift one year, the former manager of Purdy's, Rachel Stone, gave me the original hand-painted Ms. Purdy sign that she had salvaged from a broom closet in Purdy's final hours. It hangs here in my home, which also has its own signage, Homo Heaven. Now let me see if I can show you that. There's the Homo sign. When we were younger, here in Winnipeg, there was no queer identified signage publicly. There was not a rainbow or a triangle in sight. So my roommates and I started with a hand-painted sign and worked our way up to neon. When we were young, people used to say to us, "So you're gay, why do you need to advertise it? I mean, you might as well have a neon sign." So we decided that's exactly what we needed. The first time that Laurie and I went to Ms. Purdy's, it was a snowy night in late fall, actually kind of like tonight, in 1988. A woman plunked herself down at our table and asked, "Who are you?" Her name was Mary Morgan, and she was wonderfully classically 1980s dykey. She was really loud and opinionated, a butchy teller of tall tales. That night, she told us about traveling solo through Mexico on a motorcycle. It was the first of many evenings with Mary, later leading to Mary becoming roommates with us here at Homo Heaven and keeping in touch with Mary as she continued to roam. Today, Tuesday, April 13th, at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, Mary Morgan became the first person we've ever known to choose assisted suicide through the MAID program. Still a trailblazer. She emailed us yesterday with her death itinerary, which was to be accompanied by the songs of Chris Williamson, and said, "Wave at me when I whiz by." So today at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, Laurie and I sat in our studio and waved. After the fire, Laurie and I started working on a new performance piece about fire's opposite, or at least the most opposite thing we could think of, snow. The piece involved no costume, no props, no more stuff, just me moving among the audience, talking. In Manitoba, we have polar bears. There's stories from here and across the northern latitudes about hunters who have seen a polar bear in the distance, perhaps silhouetted against the sky, sitting hunched in the snow, and then estimated the distance and the time to sneak up on it, say 500 meters or 30 minutes, only to discover after 15 minutes that it's not a polar bear at all. It's a marmot, not big, but little, not far, but close. In an all snow landscape, there's nothing to help you get your bearings, so to speak. Time and space isn't always what it seems. Now, as part of this performance, Snow, I plan to move among the audience and join their hands together to make a human model of interlocking water molecules that together form snowflakes. The piece was written, rehearsed, a gig was planned, and then came COVID. Imagine being in a cramped room with a performance artist speaking all over you and making you hold hands with a stranger. That didn't happen. And that's not happening. Not now, and maybe not ever. It's hard to predict how this past year will continue to shape us and our world. Many, many things we took for granted, many things that were assumed or given have been moved aside. That can be disorienting, but it can also be powerful. It means change can happen. Many things used to be so embedded in our culture as normal, they seemed immovable. Now they're not as fixed in place. Now they wobble, which should make us all want to push harder and keep pushing all together. Family, chosen family, lovers, friends, collaborators, allies. These relationships have changed me. It's been decades since I've seen some of you here tonight. And when I said yes to this gig, it was to see you again across decades and thousands of kilometers. Tonight, time and space has shifted a bit, fallen away. Snowflakes are not symmetrical. They're not even all six-sided. Quite a few of them have one really long arm because as they've bumbled through the atmosphere, they've reached out to a passing water droplet and it's made them grow just there. All sorts of things happen to snowflakes along the way down. They get blown through all sorts of different climatic conditions. They melt, they freeze, bump into each other, get stuck together, break apart, grow, shrink, and recombine. Perfectly intact doesn't exist in nature or in culture. We each carry our own archives, and we carry parts of each other too. Thanks for having me, Marusya.